The drought is, of course, such a massive problem for Australia, but the federal government has decided to put Shane Stone, as the former Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, into a position as a Chief Advisor of the government and coordinator about how the federal government can better handle what is happening when it comes to the drought. The one and only and wonderful Matt Cunningham had a chance to talk to him a bit earlier.
Shane Stone, congratulations on your new role. You're about to embark on a tour of drought-stricken parts of the country, beginning in the Northern Territory. What are you expecting to hear?
Well, the key to the success in the flood zone after the monsoonal drenching that North West Queensland received was to actually go out and speak to people, to say what works for you. So we were very serious about, local initiatives that could be implemented locally. And I think everyone agrees that the flood and the management of the flood has been a great success, largely because of the collaboration between the federal and Queensland governments and the way the community rallied. So, building on that template, I'll get out and about very quickly. I'll go down through the Territory, then across into Queensland. I mean, the tragedy in Queensland is that there are 5 local government areas that were declared for flood that have now been declared for drought. And that's one of the great contradictions in this country, that we don't utilise these great masses of water when they come our way. So it'll be a long trip. We will finish up on the 20th of December, but I will have good input from the local community. But let's remember this, there are at least 23 existing federal initiatives that are in play. The government has committed over $8 billion for the drought, in the same way they committed $3.3 billion for the flood. So when I hear people say, the government's doing nothing, well, I'm sorry, but they're misinformed and they don't know.
Do state governments need to do more, though? Because we've heard this week about the disparity between what some states are offering drought-affected farmers as opposed to what's being offered in other states.
Yesterday I was in Moree and I attended the Agricultural and Drought Ministers' Ministerial Council meeting. And I'd have to say that we came away from that meeting with a better understanding of what we all need to do. As I said to those ministers, and I can say this because I've been a head of government, I've been a cabinet minister, you've got to be bold, you have to be creative, and you need to be remembered for doing something. And that's their challenge. And that something is to make sure that we're all harmonised in terms of what we're doing. It will vary from state to state because the flood, the drought varies from state to state. I mean, for some people, they've been in drought for 8 years. Others have only been in more recent times. So there isn't a universal condition out there when it comes to the drought. But I was very encouraged in speaking to all those ministers, regardless of political colour. Everyone knows they've got to get together, collaborate, we've got to harmonise the measures, and there is an urgency. Now, they have a great opportunity here. I come empowered by the Prime Minister of Australia. I have authority to break through to, as he uses the terminology, to be the congestion buster that we were for the floods and we will be for drought. There is an urgency. People can't be just sitting around waiting for someone to turn up and say, well, did you know about this measure or that measure? There are 23 separate measures on offer from the Commonwealth as we speak.
You were quoted in The Australian this week saying that this response to the drought needs to be above politics, but can it be? Because it seems that every time we hear about a drought or a fire or a flood in this country, immediately that discussion turns to politics.
Except from me. And I ride above it all because I say to them, we've got to pull together on this. There has to be a collaboration. And we proved that in Queensland. I mean, the Palaszczuk government is a Labor government. The Morrison government is a coalition government. We worked hand in glove to address the flood. And we did it very effectively through the agency, NQ-LERA and Q-RIDER. You couldn't have fitted a bit of paper between our efforts. That's the model.
Do we need to have a discussion about climate change?
Well, I think we're having that discussion anyway, depending on where you sit on the spectrum of belief, one way or the other. The climate has always been changing. There's nothing new about that. It's how we respond. And the fact of the matter is, we're in drought. We're here now. All right, we need to do with the here and now, as we did with the flood. You can have the discussion in the background about whose fault it is or what caused it, or you can hypothesise all you want. At the moment, I'm trying to deal with families who are basically on their knees, have either lost their stock, about to lose their stock, they've run out of water, they don't know what the future holds for them, they're in deep financial stress. They're not going to be helped by a discussion about climate change. And I say to them, come on, get real. We need to get out there, help these people through this, and then we need to have a broader discussion about the future, the resilience, what do we put in place so that we start to drought-proof this country. Look, let's not forget, I mean, anyone who knows their poetry, whether it was Banjo Patterson, Henry Lawson, or read Mary McCullough's book on a sunburnt country, this is Australia. We are a land of floods and droughts, bushfires, all sorts of things happen to us. And it's ever been so, reaching way back into Indigenous times. So there's nothing new about what we're experiencing.
One thing that's been reported out of the meeting that you attended in Moree is that the Weather Bureau has told those agriculture ministers that we shouldn't expect any significant rainfall until at least April next year. You talk about those families that are doing it so tough at the moment. How much tougher is this going to make it for them?
It's going to be a lot tougher. I was quite depressed with what I was briefed on in terms of their predictions. They're not always right, but they've probably got a pretty good handle on it, and they're very expert in what they do, but there's going to be more pain, and that's why it's important that we don't get sidetracked on all this other stuff, having all these debates on the sidelines. We need to work together in collaboration, we need to harmonise the measures, and we need to act with a degree of urgency. People need our help now. Now, I've got the mandate from the Prime Minister. I've been told by the Prime Minister, go and do with drought what you did with flood. Be a congestion buster, lead the way. And that's exactly what I'm doing. And look, I'll stand on toes. I mean, I did during the flood, but got the job done. That's my role.
You talk about droughts and flooding rains, the great story of this country. Inevitably, this drought is going to break. What do we need to do now to make sure that when that happens, we don't find ourselves in the situation that we're in today?
We need a plan. We need a plan that everyone will embrace. Everyone will say, yeah, that's the correct thing to do. And whether it's applying the techniques of the Malone Foundation, which is about the regeneration of soils, or whether it's about water diversion so we don't see a mass of water the size of the UK. That's how big that flood was. As big as the UK. It was 700 kilometres long, and that water went out to sea. So we need to have a better plan in how we harness those resources like these great masses of fresh water and we turn it to our advantage as a country.
There was a report from the CSIRO a year or so ago talking about a plan for dams in Northern Australia. Is that something that we should be looking at, whether we should be looking at moving some of that agriculture industry north to a place where we know that abundant rainfall exists?
Well, the issue of dams arouses all sorts of passions in people across the political spectrum. We've got to get past that. We've got to work out how do we utilise that water. And dam isn't always the answer. Sometimes you can get an effective use of water through diversion, as they are doing, or they're wanting to do, in the Flinders Shire in northwest Queensland. There's a lot of innovative stuff around. And we've got to be a lot more lateral in the way that we think of in terms of how do we utilise water. When it's pouring, it's flooding, do we just stand by and let that all sort of wash away, or do we capture it and put it to good use?
Shane Stone, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.